in August of 2022. I'm Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson here with Fox 6's Jenna Sachs.
Yes, thank you. And we are here in our Fox 6 Digital Center tonight. We will be here live in the newsroom, coming to you from our Facebook page, YouTube, and also on fox6now.com. If we want, we can show you a bit of our setup here tonight. We have
not
a
just
crew.
the two of us.
No, it's not just the two. There's a whole bunch of people here. Say hello, everybody.
And you see Jeff Franks is just waiting right there. You see he has pizza. The pizza has already arrived, so you know it's election night.
Right. We also have Kale Zimney here, Anthony Mandela, and Sarah Smith helping us get through the evening. We're going to be checking in with a number of our reporters who are already setting up at election night parties for candidates for the governor, all sorts of races we're going to be covering tonight.
And of course, this is a primary election, so this isn't like a general election in November. It's not Republicans against Democrats. It's Democrats against Democrats, Republicans against Republicans, Libertarians against Libertarians. So if you voted today, you still got an hour, by the way, to get to the polls. And if you are headed there, know that you've got to pick a party. Wisconsin's an open primary state, so you don't have to be a member of any particular party, but you've got to pick one, and you vote for the candidates you most want to represent that party in the general election. We've got some pretty important races happening tonight.
We do. We have some candidates for U.S. Senate. As we mentioned before, we have the gubernatorial race coming up. We have Lieutenant Governor, Milwaukee County Sheriff, and also some statewide races. We have the Attorney General, primary, Secretary of State, and Robin Vos has an interesting primary going on as well.
Probably the most interesting local race in terms of assembly races. That one has got a lot of attention, not just here in Wisconsin, but nationally, of course, because of the involvement of former President Donald Trump and his concerns about certification of the 2020 presidential election.
And we can show you here now, we have Robin Vos facing off against fellow Republican Adam Steen. And this race, as you mentioned, has gotten interesting because President Trump weighed in, throwing his endorsement behind Adam Steen in this race. But I mean, Robin Vos has been serving in his position. He's arguably the most powerful Republican in the state of Wisconsin. So that's going to be an interesting race to follow. If for some reason he can't advance beyond this primary, it would be a very strong indication of President Trump's influence in that part of the state, down in Racine County. But, you know, Robin Vos has been serving as Speaker for, since 2014, and he's been in the assembly for quite a long time.
And in positions of power there. So this will be a very important race to watch. We can imagine that President Trump is watching that one very closely as well. We have a lot of races we can talk about, but obviously probably one of the biggest is the Republican primary for governor, because we know that Tony Evers is going to be the Democratic nominee. He's going to be back to run for re-election in November. Who he's going to face is really the big question. And obviously the two main candidates vying for that are former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch and businessman Tim Michels. We also have Tim Rampton, who is one of the top three challengers for that position.
But a long shot.
But a long shot, obviously. And there's a lot of discussion about this being a really close race tonight between Kleefisch and Michels.
And people are watching this race from across the country tonight because there is also dueling endorsement involved. We've had Mike Pence throwing his endorsement behind Rebecca Kleefisch, and we have President Trump throwing his support behind Michels. Michels, more of that outsider type. He's a businessman, maybe the more anti-establishment person in this race right now. And recently it has turned a little negative with some negative ads running as well. So that is a very hotly contested race.
And are we going to be going to Ashley Sears? So we've got Ashley Sears, who is actually in the field at the election victory watch party.
We don't have her.
We are going to check in with her. Okay, I thought we were ready. We're going to be checking in with her later. She's in Oconomowoc, and I know we also have reporters at a lot of the different election watch parties tonight. I use the term election victory party, and I say that in particular because you note both Kleefisch and Michels have referred to their watch parties as election victory parties, both trying to express that level of confidence. But obviously, this one's way too close to call.
Right, for the person who gets to take on Tony Evers in the fall. And I'll give you some background on why this race is important. Heading into this race, Wisconsin has divided government. So Governor Evers, as a Democrat, has some power over Republicans who control both the chamber and the state legislature. So whoever wins this race will be governor during the 2024 presidential race and in a position to sign or veto election law, among several other laws that a conservative legislature may be able to put through. And right now, a Democratic governor is putting a stop on a bit of that.
Yeah, obviously, with Tony Evers as a Democrat and a Republican-controlled legislature, we've had a lot of that gridlock that you would expect from opposing parties. If a Republican candidate is able to overtake Governor Evers in the fall, you could theoretically then have Republicans controlling both the governor's office and then, of course, both houses of the legislature, they would have a lot more power to get things done that fit their agenda. So obviously, it's a very important race for both sides, and who is going to represent Republicans against Governor Evers is just obviously an enormous question.
Right. And we mentioned the dueling endorsements that went on here. And it may be a test of how much the Republican Party has changed over the years, because heading into this primary, Rebecca Clayfish had more name recognition, I would say, having served as lieutenant governor with Scott Walker. And she's running heavily on that record. But she has said this race feels a lot like 2010, but it's not 2010. We have to see how much the Republican Party has changed since Governor Walker was our governor here in Wisconsin. Has President Trump had more influence at this point than Governor Walker, who has been stumping and making campaign ads for Rebecca Clayfish. So is today's party the party of Rebecca Clayfish or Tim Michels? It'll be very interesting to see.
Well, speaking of Tim Michels, we've got our first reporter out in the field ready to go. We are going to go out to the Tim Michels camp. I actually missed the flag as to who's out there. It's Gabby. Hey, Gabby, how are you? Tell us what's happening at the Michels camp.
I'm doing well. By the way, let me know if the audio is a little bit too loud. I know we have music going on, so if I need to move outside, I can, so just let me know. Right now, the doors are not open yet. The doors don't open until 8 o'clock, so we're still waiting, really, for people to kind of come in. Of course, the big thing is we want to hear from his supporters. I mean, I really do want to hear what they have to say. I'm going to give you guys, like, just over my shoulder, this is where Tim Michels will be standing. We are expecting him to speak tonight. One of the things that I found interesting, I was talking to his campaign advisor, and he told me that the big thing for them was the endorsement from Donald Trump. So that's really the big thing, is kind of trying to see, is this endorsement, is that what's going to push him over the edge to beat Rebecca Clayfish? Now, his team is really confident. I mean, they've said to me that they do think that he's going to win, and they're kind of already focused on beating Governor Evers in the fall. And so the big thing is really just kind of waiting and seeing for those numbers to come in. I mean, the polls really do have the two candidates neck and neck, but Michael seems to be really confident. We talked to him earlier today while he was voting, and his big thing, which I've heard him say multiple times, is that he's a businessman, he's not a career politician, and he thinks that that is really going to set him apart, that along with the Trump endorsement.
And Gabby, Trump not only endorsed him, he actually came to the state, right, and stood on a stage with Tim Michels.
Yeah, that was the big thing. I mean, you have the former president coming in. He's the person who's, stumping for you. I will say that, I watched it. It was on a Saturday. It was a lot of, it almost sounded like Trump was getting ready to
the Michels camp. Gabby, we're gonna come back to you a little later on and check on the signal. Obviously, that's one of the things we're going to run into with digital coverage from time to time.
I will tell you, from covering election nights, Wi-Fi is very difficult in some of those rooms. It's kind of like being in a stadium with a lot of people on their cell phones, I'm sure, checking, all the latest political news. So I'm glad we got her for that long.
Well, one of the things I heard from her right there was the confidence that the Michels camp is expressing. And I think they may have been the first to come out with the term victory party. A lot of candidates will call these watch parties because they always talk about being cautiously optimistic. They don't want to be overconfident. Michels certainly trying to express that confidence, and Clayfish also calling hers an election night victory party. And we have Ashley Sears, the Clayfish camp at Oconomowoc at Cornerstone Pub, I believe. Is that right, Ashley?
Hey guys, yeah, I'm at the Cornerstone Pub in downtown Oconomowoc here. I want to kind of give you a lay of the room here. Let me see if I can switch my camera. I'm not sure if I can. No? I'm going to flip it around here. If you take a look at this, it's a very small room compared to what we're used to on election nights. We have, I think I counted 16 cameras from across the state inside this room here. We're at the second floor of the Cornerstone Pub, and we are kind of crammed in here tonight, and Wi-Fi is an issue for us. I heard you guys talking about that. So you may lose me at some point. But today, Rebecca Clayfish was talked to a camera that we had out there saying, the same thing. She's very confident. She knocked on a ton of doors. She said she crisscrossed the states kind of leading up to this primary. She does have the endorsement of former Governor Scott Walker, who she served under for 18 years. But as you said, she did not win the endorsement of former President Donald Trump. She did get the endorsement of former Vice President Mike Pence as well as Senator Ted Cruz. So she's hoping that kind of support pushes people to the polls and they vote in her favor.
Ashley, has she said recently why she feels she wants this position, what the issues are that are most important to her in her campaigning?
You know, she's touted her experience. She says her 8 years as lieutenant governor under Scott Walker kind of shows that she has a proven track record. She's been very vocal about wanting to get rid of the Wisconsin Election Commission. She believes that abortion should be banned in the state, and she says that she wants fairer elections in her words. She did say that, you know, she does believe that the election was rigged in 2020, but she would not decertify that election.
It's a good omen. 2024, and at the time, neither said that they were ready to support President Trump. Tim Michels has since come out and changed his tune and said he will support President Trump in 2024. But that is obviously he's obviously the Trump-backed candidate. We've got Vice President Pence backing Clayfish, so a long night ahead, but obviously a very interesting race, Ashley.
Yes, it's going to be a close one tonight. So we're here. We're in for the long haul. I might need to get some coffee, even though I have the cutoff of, you know, like noon. I have a coffee cutoff, but tonight I might break that rule. So you might see me bouncing off the walls.
I'm already way past you. It's after 7 o'clock, and I've got the fancy Open Record coffee mug. By the way, Open Record podcast. Check it out on Thursday. We'll be talking about this election
Shameless
and the
plug.
results.
We had to do it. Thank you,
of course,
Ashley.
I've got to plug it. We're on digital. We got to talk about the podcast. You know, the governor's race obviously is a big one to watch tonight, and for a long time, Rebecca Clayfish seemed like she was going to be the heir apparent to this this nomination or the party's selection to go against Governor Evers. And it was only in April that Tim Michels came into the race, and he has self-funded this campaign. Now, Michels, a co-owner of Michels Construction, and obviously has a lot of wealth. He has pumped $8 million into this campaign already, and obviously he's run a lot of television ads, and Rebecca Clayfish, of course, has a war chest of her own, and both of them have been putting a lot. The real question is, because of the heat of this primary, are they exhausting some of that war chest that could be used against Governor Evers this fall?
Well, I think we're going to definitely see that war chest open again, no matter who advances from this primary today. But we can give you a little background on both candidates, because I think a lot of voters are familiar with Rebecca Clayfish. She was our lieutenant governor from 2011 to 2019. She survived a recall election in 2012 following Act 10, of course, which made landmark changes to union laws. And Vice President Pence was in town with her in Milwaukee on August 3rd, throwing his endorsement behind her. And she's been running very heavily on that experience in the Walker administration, saying she would re-implement some of the policies that were taken away by the Evers administration. And as Ashley mentioned, she's got a lot of values that include anti-abortion, pro-gun. She supports school choice. She calls herself a law and order candidate. Very traditional Republican values. It may come down to whether people want an outsider, whether they want someone who doesn't have that history in politics, or whether they want someone like Clayfish who does.
And if they also want someone who is a Trump-backed candidate. We're about to see the influence here in Wisconsin in this race. When President Trump gives an endorsement, wherever he does this around the country, that's always a question, right? Does his candidate win? And there's been mixed results, but what's going to happen here? We know Wisconsin is obviously a battleground state and will be in 2024. We now know Milwaukee is going to host the 2024 Republican National Convention. So obviously, former President Trump is focusing a lot of his attention on the state of Wisconsin and two of the big races, the governor's primary, backing Tim Michels, and of course that Assembly Robin Vos opponent Adam Steen backing him there.
And a lot of reason behind why he's choosing the candidates he does, President Trump I'm speaking of, is because of their views on whether they would decertify the last presidential election or not. And that's why he's gotten involved, I believe, in the Robin Vos race.
Yeah, he's certainly expressed his dissatisfaction that Wisconsin's Assembly Speaker would not take action to decertify the election. Robin Vos has repeatedly said that's not possible. He can't do it, and that's just not part of his job. And President Trump is now trying to take him out because of that. And Adam Steen Steen is the candidate he's backing in that effort. So we will be watching that race closely tonight. Now, we talked about the governor's race a lot. There are a lot of other races that maybe won't get quite the same attention. We'll talk tonight about the Attorney General's race. We'll talk. We would have been talking a lot more about the U.S. Senate race, but it's become a foregone conclusion that is going to be Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes against Ron Johnson, current Senator Ron Johnson. Obviously, Barnes had some pretty tough opponents, Alex Lasry and Sarah Godlewski. So we knew that was going to be a very interesting race to watch. And then in just recent weeks, those candidates have all withdrawn and thrown their support behind Barnes. So that's a foregone conclusion, right?
Right. But what's coming for that race is one of the highest political battles in the country. It's going to be a very high profile race. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be spent on both sides in that upcoming race because it involves Ron Johnson, who's a bit of a lightning rod. So there's going to be, just expect the television ads to come and ads from every direction because there's a lot of people interested in that because the majority of the U.S. Senate is on the line. There's a lot on the line. And, I mentioned before, Ron Johnson has been a lightning rod. He's even made some comments recently that have made him so, having to do with Medicare and so on. But he is one of Donald Trump's most vocal supporters. He's the only incumbent Senate Republican seeking re-election this year in a state that Biden carried. So obviously a lot of interest from both sides on whether they can take the state.
And there's a controversy, of course, over whether or not he was trying to get a new slate of electors in to overturn that 2020 result for President Trump. So obviously, there's going to be a lot of money thrown into that race between Lieutenant Governor Barnes and Ron Johnson this fall. But tonight, we know those are going to be the two candidates from each of the parties. So there's not really a lot to watch in terms of the vote in those races. The others are still on the ballot. They didn't withdraw in time to be formally removed from the ballot, so those names are still there. But there is little question that it will be U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, the incumbent for the Republicans, and Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes for Democrats.
But it seemed like they did want to unify the Democratic Party behind Barnes heading into this race today because everybody dropped out within a week, the other four runners in the race.
And threw their support behind Barnes. They didn't just withdraw, they expressed their support.
The only people left on the ballot for the Democratic side had less than 1% in the Marquette University Law School polls. So we know that he's going to advance today, but just brace for what's to come with that race, really.
But speaking of races we usually don't talk a whole lot about, but tonight there's some real interest. Secretary of State. That is not usually a real sexy political race in the state of Wisconsin, but there's some real interest, particularly on the Republican side, but also on the Democrat side.
There is. Well, if you're not familiar with the Secretary of State's office in Wisconsin, in other states, the Secretary of State's office is involved with election oversight. It's not in our state. Our state has the Wisconsin Elections Commission, this bipartisan agency that oversees and administers our elections.
Independent of the Secretary of State, right?
Right. But there have been some calls to get rid of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And if that happens, some of that power may go back to the Secretary of State's office, which is a very small office. I've been there.
It is now. It wasn't way back when, right?
Right. When Doug LaFollette took over this position decades ago, he had 50 staff members, and now he's down to 2 full-time staff members in the basement of the Capitol. So there would have to be some changes if they wanted to throw some of that important responsibility to that office. But that's why there's interest, and that's why there's more names on the ballot.
So the incumbent there is facing a challenger on the Democratic side, and there are 3 candidates on the Republican side. So obviously there really is some interest right now in what happens tonight, and we find out who those opponents will be in the November election in the Secretary of State's race.
Now back to the U.S. Senate race, we have Aaron Mabin is in Milwaukee with Mandela Barnes at his party. Aaron, can you hear us? How's it going over there?
Hey, I have you just fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
absolutely.
We do.
Great. So yeah, we're inside the cooperage right now. You can see behind me, this is where all the media is set up. So there are risers here. We're kind of taking a little bit of a break. And then on this side is where the stage is all set for Mandela Barnes to speak a little bit later today. We understand that there will be some speakers before him, and then he'll take the stage. We don't have time, and then people are starting to trickle in, so you can see some people, gathering in the bar area. They're just kind of chatting about this, an election. And Jenna and Brian, I would say 3 weeks ago, we weren't expecting an election night like tonight. We were expecting Alex Lazary and Sarah Galuski to be in this race and some others to be in it as well. But it's more of a victory party already because political experts believe that Mandela Barnes is going to run away with this race. He doesn't really have any big competitors tonight. So a lot of people are still filing in and looking to see what he has to say, not necessarily about the past, but what's ahead as he faces Ron Johnson in the November election.
Imagine tonight when Mandela Barnes gives what we all expect will be a victory speech. This is really going to be that first announcement, that launching of setting the tone for the campaign to come against U.S. Senator Ron Johnson.
You know, and they've already kind of had exchanges back and forth, and they kind of say the same things about each other. They say that they're out of touch. They call each other extreme. So those ads and those messages have already sharpened in the past few weeks, and I'm expecting them to sharpen even more. And Jenna and Brian, this is such an important race, not only in the state, but in the country as we look at the U.S. Senate and we look at Congress. This is such an important race that Democrats don't want to lose. So I think we've already seen Senator Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Cory Booker, back Mandela Barnes. I think a lot more big firepower from the Democratic Party will back Mandela Barnes if he wins this election. And I think that's going to add more fuel to the Ron Johnson campaign and also the Mandela Barnes campaign as well.
Aaron, I know Mandela Barnes is a young candidate. I believe he's 35, which makes
35.
him half the age of the average U.S. senator. Can you tell us a bit about how he got to this point? I know the lieutenant governor is often a stepping stone for further political runs, but how did he get to this point at such a young age?
I would say how he got to this point is how he really tries to connect with voters. It started off, he's a Marshall High School graduate. He's the son of a school teacher and someone who worked in a factory, so he likes to really lean into his middle-class upbringing. He went into the state assembly and started off very young in the trenches of inner-city Milwaukee politics, and it was just a few years ago that he became the lieutenant governor. So he's had some wins. He's had some losses. I believe he lost to Lena Taylor a few years ago, so he knows what a loss looks like. He's also, a big marathon runner, so he knows what a win looks like, and he knows how to train for a marathon and how to train for a race too. So his upbringing, he would say, is what has got to this point as well. And he's also made great connections. I think we saw that when Alex Lazary and Sarah Galuski got out of the race and they backed him and they immediately supported him. You don't really see that in a lot of races nationally. So I think he continues to make connections on the local level, and we see that on the national level as well. But 35, that's right, he's more than half the age of Senator Ron Johnson, who has been in his seat since 2010. He's a two-time winner. But Ron Johnson has always faced Russ Feingold in past elections, so this is going to be...
Oh, boy, Aaron was smooth that whole time and finally just froze up there at the end, but we know where Aaron was going with that. He's obviously going to now face Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes instead of Feingold.
But he has defeated Russ Feingold twice in the past.
He has, and Senator Johnson has the power of incumbency in the United States Senate. That's extremely powerful. Often means if you're going to run again, there's a really good chance, and short of some sort of scandal, you're going to win. One of the polling outfits that I was reading today, 538, which is a well-known polling organization, has indicated that U.S. Senator Johnson stands about a 2 out of 3 chance of beating Lieutenant Governor Barnes, at least as of right now. But for an incumbent, that's actually pretty vulnerable. So this is going to be an extremely interesting race, and we know there's going to be a lot of outside money that will come in outside of Wisconsin to influence it.
And perhaps we didn't necessarily expect that Ron Johnson would run again, because he had initially said he would not seek a third term, but then said he felt that the country was in peril, and he felt that was the reason he needed to run again. But we're going to have two very different candidates. I mean, Democrats and Republicans are so different these days, but when it comes to Roe v. Wade, Medicare, term limits, the Supreme Court, there are so many different opposing views that Mandela Barnes and Ron Johnson are going to have to fight back and forth about as this continues on.
Well, and the polls are still open, so we don't have results to talk about yet, but that's one interesting thing that's different about a primary night than about a general election night. On a general election night in Wisconsin, we pretty well know the pockets and the areas of the state to look at in terms of turnout, to say that's going to help this candidate or that candidate, because they are so starkly in contrast with one another. In this case, you're dealing with primaries where many of these candidates agree on 99% of the issues, and they're trying to find the one or two that separate them. There are some cases where there's a vast difference, but a lot of times they're trying to find that one thing to differentiate themselves from the other, but by and large, they agree on most things. So you're not going to find that stark contrast like you will in November between, for instance, Governor Evers and whoever wins at the Republican primary for governor. So same thing with Ron Johnson and Lieutenant Governor Barnes. You're not going to see that kind of a stark contrast between candidates tonight, but this obviously sets the stage for those races.
And you mentioned some polling recently. There was a June Marquette University poll done that showed that Ron Johnson's favorability was 37%, but he runs about even in matchups with Barnes, and enthusiasm among Republicans has been tracking higher than enthusiasm among Democrats, at least for voting in the primary. So it'll possibly be a very tight race, and we know independents can sway this race one way or another and turn out as well.
You know, I know we're going to have Mordecai Lee on later, or at least I think we are, and I'm curious to hear what he has to say about enthusiasm, because I think the expectation this fall is a midterm election, and traditionally the party that loses the previous presidential race does well in the following midterm, and the enthusiasm among Republicans is expected to be high. But there are a lot of things that have come about recently that have fired up some of the Democratic Party base, in particular the U.S. Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade, and that's got a lot of people motivated to go to the polls. So I'm curious to know what he has to say about where motivation plays into what's coming this fall, and how it can affect things tonight in a primary. Obviously, things are very different strategically in terms of what's going on tonight. By the way, I want to point something out. I don't know if we have any way, we probably don't, to show Sarah Smith
Sarah's
over here.
holding
You
up
go on
these
the wide shot, maybe you can
signs
see
for
her.
us.
I like that she keeps holding up these little signs. It looks like she's like bidding at an auction, but she's telling us where we're going to go next.
Oh, we're going to the Milwaukee County Sheriff's race? Is that? Let's talk about
We're
it
gonna
first.
okay, Milwaukee
I would
County Sheriff's
love
race.
to.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's look. By the way,
And actually, speaking of races, you said a lot of these won't be decided tonight. This race will essentially be decided
right,
tonight.
because in this case there is no Republican candidate. So the Democratic candidate for sheriff who wins tonight will be the sheriff from Milwaukee County. And I just want to point out, by the way, that these little it's okay. We went to the grab. So we have these little notebooks, and I want to thank Jenna for helping me prepare these tonight. It's like we did our homework and we're in school, but we're going to flip to the sheriff's page on this one.
Well, it is an interesting sheriff's race because I think people might have difficulty because we're not as familiar with these three names as we are with Mandela
and they all
Barnes.
happen to start with the letter B. I think of by the way, I don't know if there's sports fans watching this, but back in the days of the Houston Astros, the Killer Bees, you had Craig Biggio, Lance Berkman, and who was the third? Why am I blanking on the third one?
You are asking the wrong person.
Brian Graham, where are you? He would know. Jeff Bagwell. Thank you, Howard. So you had the Killer Bees. I feel like we have the Killer Bees here for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's race. The fact that they're not all that well known publicly, and they all start with the letter B. Danita Ball, Thomas Beal, Brian Barco. These are the three candidates, and one of them is going to be the next Milwaukee County Sheriff.
And they all have lengthy histories with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, working there for decades, and they have some of the same ideals. And what helped me was that Jason Calvi, our political reporter, interviewed them, and he posted the full interviews on FOX6Now.com, so you could listen to it and see what they brought up in conversation, what seemed to be important to the three different candidates. Because if you take on certain issues like reckless driving, they may have similar answers, but we have someone probably who can answer all this a lot better than me. I'm going to let Sam do the talking. Hi, Sam.
It's like Cale Zimney was bidding this time. He tells
Yeah.
us Sam Kramer's ready to talk about one of these candidates.
Can you hear me?
Or maybe all of them. Hey,
Yes,
Sam, we
we
can
can
hear you. Tell us what you know about this sheriff's race.
Awesome. Yeah, hi there. Well, I was just listening. You got it spot on with the Killer Bees there, with the Houston Astros reference there, Brian. I appreciate it. But really, it's so interesting, and we said it on the air at 5:30. It's not just a partisan primary. It's really a promotion that's at stake here. If you look at these three candidates, they're so similar. And maybe we don't know so much about their message. There's not a ton of money in this race as there is for the governor and for the Senate. But what's at stake is just as important. So each of these three candidates all have about 25 years of experience in law enforcement in some fashion. And they bring that to different areas here. So Danita Ball, she is currently the undersheriff for Sheriff Ernell Lucas. Lucas actually asked her to come out of retirement from 22 plus years at the Milwaukee Police Department to kind of be his right-hand person here to lead this office. She's the undersheriff again. She runs day-to-day operations. Captain Thomas Beal is actually serving right now as the commander of the Milwaukee County Jail. He's been at the office and really has climbed the ranks since 1997. And then Brian Barco is an inspector. He leads the Investigative Services Bureau at the Sheriff's Office right now. And September, I believe, marks 25 years for him. So there's a lot of experience. And if you were to look at an organizational chart, all three of these people here are really just below the sheriff. So again, promotion might just be the key word of the night.
Could you tell us a bit about the responsibilities this person will be taking on and some of the big issues that they'll be tackling? Because there's a lot at stake. There
is a lot at stake, and obviously reckless driving comes to mind. Jurisdiction is kind of tricky. It's the freeways, it's the parks, you think about the beaches, and really just kind of ensuring that public spaces are good to go. It's also the Milwaukee County Jail, and we've documented through the last several months a lot of issues that have been happening there as far as not just inmate safety for those that are staying or they're in custody, but also just recruitment and retention problems, staffing shortages, that sort of thing. So there's a lot on their plates. Whoever takes over here will then manage a budget that's right around $50 million. And, Milwaukee County, the Board of Supervisors has already talked about, questioning whether that's whether that amount of money is proper, whether it should go down a little bit. So it's going to be an interesting job and really one that, again, tackles all of Milwaukee County.
And it's obviously a wide open race. Not long after we had 15 years of David Clark as Milwaukee County Sheriff, and then when he left in 2017, Ernell Lucas won the first election against acting Sheriff Richard Schmidt. Now, Lucas just ran for mayor here in Milwaukee and finished a disappointing 5th in the primary. And at that time, right away said, I'm not going to run for re-election for sheriff. So this is a wide open race there. Now, Sam, I know there's been some recent a Judges Association, I believe, raised some real questions about courthouse security and just staffing of courthouse security. How big a role does that play in this race?
I think it's going to be really important as far as how they can move forward and really kind of advance this agency's directive to protect all public spaces. And you're right, they have worried about safety at the courthouse that's just connected to the jail. So it's going to be interesting to see whoever takes over here, how they advance from campaign stage to actually leading this office. Because as we all know, they can say so many things out on the campaign trail, but once they move to that corner office, what will they actually do?
One of the things I heard at least two of the candidates, if not all three, talk about is the use of data-driven policing. And I think especially when you're short on staff and people are talking about cutting your budget, the ability to be more efficient with deployments by relying on data can be a big thing. That seems to be a real high point for at least a couple of the candidates, if not all three.
Yeah, it's huge. I think all three have really touched on it, but none more than Brian Barco. He seems, I think, apparently aware of the fact that, look, they don't have as many deputies as they would like, but they understand issues like reckless driving, that they can tackle them perhaps a bit more effective if they have enough people in the right places. So he wants to be smart, kind of studying case data and calls for service and kind of looking at perhaps the map and just seeing where they can properly allocate their resources here to make it really go as far as it really possibly can.
And Sam, have they talked at all about retaining deputies, recruitment, how they can help with those issues with staffing that they're currently facing? I know a lot of industries are facing issues with finding people right now, but have they talked about
especially,
that?
Yeah, it's
and
been
we
a huge
need them,
deal.
right?
Yeah, there has been some conversations through forums over the last 2 weeks. It comes down to how they can kind of make their case. First off, in two aspects. First, how they can make their case to the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. A lot of them, I think all three of them said, look, if you compare the salaries in Milwaukee County to other counties, there are more incentives to go to a different county and work there as opposed to coming to Milwaukee County, which may even be surprising given how big and how populated Milwaukee County is. Secondly, there's been a lot of talk as far as valuing the employees that are here and listening to them, gathering their ideas, but also creating programs, peer support, that sort of thing, mental health resources, making them available to deputies and correctional officers to really show that whoever is in charge here actually cares about those who are doing this work. A lot of it thankless work, really, if you think about it.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.
I just want to point one thing out, by the way. Ashley Sears was talking about the cramped space and the Clayfish party. The Sam Memorial Ballroom there, Sam Kramer Memorial Ballroom there is not memorial, but I just realized when I said that. I'm sorry, Sam. That went the wrong way.
That's okay.
But no, you're working in the cramped space there, and we give you a lot of credit for bringing us all that information.
Yeah, I'll just say too, it's all glitz and glam, right, on election night. But for us, it is hurry up and wait. We're going to see whoever seems to jump out to the big lead, and when it's called, we'll hustle over there. But I think it's kind of also symbolic of this race. It's not it doesn't have all the money, it doesn't have all the attention, but again, it's important, especially if you live here in Milwaukee County.
All right, Sam. Yeah, thanks. Now, we talked about so many of these races tonight. When we had the mayor's race in April, what was happening at Central Count in Milwaukee was the place to watch because it was all about the mayor's race. The closest race in terms of watching that kind of thing tonight is probably the sheriff's race. Right. Even though it includes the entire county, it's heavily influenced by what happens in the city of Milwaukee. And we have our Cassidy Williams at Central Count right now. Cassidy, what do you see? What's happening there at Central Count?
From what I'm told, some seem to be going well. I'm going to try to show you a little bit. You can see they work in pairs here at Central Count. This is where in Milwaukee they count the 28,000 absentee ballots that have been brought back so far. That includes about the 7,000 people who voted early, which is otherwise known as in-person absentee voting. So you see some of the people, some of the tables, they're not actively counting right now. That's because they've wrapped up the wards they've been assigned, but they can't go home. They can't wrap things up and draw official tallies until 8 p.m. because people have until 8 to return an absentee ballot. So if you're sitting at home, you still have an absentee ballot sitting there, you have until 8 to bring it here to Central Count 1901 South Kinnickinnick, or you can also bring it to City Hall and your ballot will still be counted.
Cassidy, I know during the last race, there were a lot of observers walking around, keeping a close eye on the counting. Is that going on as well tonight?
Yeah, there are still quite a few observers. So pretty much all the workers are past kind of the yellow line there. And then anyone kind of standing off to the side is one of the observers that are kind of been here all day, making sure things go smoothly.
All right. Well, Cassidy Williams, live at Central Count. We'll probably be checking back in with you. And she brings up a good point. The polls are still open until 8 o'clock. So if you're watching our digital coverage right now and you think, oh, gosh, I didn't get a chance to vote today, you still have about 20 minutes to get to your polling place. And as long as you're in line by 8 o'clock, you can vote. So it's not like, well, what if I get there and there's a long line? They're not going to kick you out. You will be able to vote. So you've got 20 minutes. Remember, it's a primary. So you've got to pick a party. It doesn't matter which party. You don't have to be a member of the party, but you've got to pick a party whose candidate you're going to vote on. And again, you've got 20 more minutes to get that done.
And there has been some speculation this year about whether some Democrats would choose to vote as Republicans because they don't have as much necessarily at stake on this ballot. They may not have as strong an opinion as among their own candidates as the Republican side when you're deciding between Clayfish and Michaels. There has been some speculation that perhaps people would weigh in on that race instead to try to pick a candidate they think might be weaker against.
Well, and I talked to Fox 6 political reporter Jason Kelvey just before we came on about that very thing in the race between Adam Steen and Robin Voss, because there are some of the candidates went around and just did some door-to-door, asking some questions and finding out, well, who do you support and who did you support in the last election? And in that question, who do they support in the last election? They were able to discover some of the people that are looking to vote for Adam Steen were just doing so because they were Democrats who wanted to see Robin Voss out. So there is always that possibility in Wisconsin, which is an open primary state, that you can have that sort of party jumping where someone who is otherwise a Democrat might vote in the Republican primary, like you said, to try to vote for who they think would be the weaker candidate. And it can happen vice versa, the other way around.
Obviously, there are some local races to vote on, but there are also statewide items on the ballot. One thing we haven't talked about yet is the Attorney General's race. There are some candidates vying to take on Josh Kaul, who has shaped some important policy recently. I guess a lot of people would think of the future of abortion policy in Wisconsin and what to do with the state's abortion ban in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned. And Kaul has said he would not enforce the abortion ban, and he even went to court to block it, saying it would return Wisconsin to the 19th century. He obviously has the support of Planned Parenthood. And there's a three-way primary on the other side with former state representative Adam Jarko, Fond du Lac County DA Eric Toney, and attorney Karen Mueller, and they have dueling endorsements from different conservative groups and pro-life groups. And obviously that's not the only issue. There's also issues that have to
But certainly a big one this year.
Yes,
No question about
especially
it.
timely as well.
Well, and we know, if you're not familiar, just a quick recap, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade really affected the state of Wisconsin because we're one of the states that has a ban in place from a previous law that's being challenged. Attorney General Josh Kaul is leading that challenge, but the law that's in place dates back to the 19th century, and it banned abortion in Wisconsin. So it's a state right now where abortion is illegal based on the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, and how the Attorney General would or would not enforce that is going to be a big issue in this race. So those three Republicans are vying to be the ones to try to unseat Attorney General Josh Kaul.
And all said they would uphold.
They all said they
ban.
would. So that will be an issue that would affect how abortion is dealt with in Wisconsin, and that's obviously going to be a big battle come this November, whoever wins the Republican primary.
And obviously a big issue, but not the only one. The GOP has also painted Kaul as weak on crime and saying that they would crack down on alleged voter fraud as well. So voter fraud, obviously, another big topic entering into these races today.
Is there anything, this is, I know we're going to be going here for just a couple of minutes, or we might be wrapping up, I think, fairly soon, but anything we've missed, because we've talked about U.S. Senate, we've talked about.
Haven't talked about.
What haven't we talked about?
Lieutenant Governor.
Oh, that's right. We've talked about Lieutenant Governor Barnes running for U.S. Senate. We haven't talked about all the people running to replace him.
And an interesting thing in Wisconsin is that the gubernatorial candidate and lieutenant governor candidate advanced from the primary separately, and then they're merged onto the same ballot. So that makes for some interesting.
Yeah, they don't run as a
hearings.
ticket where the candidate for governor picks a running mate. They are independent in terms of the way they run.
Right. And Jason Calvi did a good story really explaining what the lieutenant governor's job is. And basically the only responsibility is to step in if the governor can no longer serve.
But as we've seen, it's a huge springboard for candidates because you have Rebecca Clayfish running for governor, who obviously served as lieutenant governor for a long time under Governor Scott Walker. And now you have Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, who currently holds that office, running for U.S. Senate and is expected to be the Democrat who will be running against U.S. Senator Ron Johnson in November.
And there are 8 Republicans on that ballot.
Republicans.
8. The most prominent probably being State Senator Roger Roth and
Patrick Teston has also gotten a lot of attention, and we've actually talked to Patrick Teston and stories about rare disease, Krabbe disease. He's been front and center on a few issues, but with 8 Republicans, that one is obviously one that remains to be seen what happens.
Right.
Do you want to play that Kelby piece?
Yeah.
Oh, we could. You know what? That's a
play
great
that
time.
piece.
We've got Sarah Smith flagging us down. We're just ignoring her the whole time, but she's actually got an important point. Jason Calvi talked about this lieutenant governor's race, so let's hear what Jason found.
If you don't know the name of the current lieutenant governor, you'd not be alone. For Wisconsin?
Man.
Do you know who the current lieutenant governor is?
The current lieutenant governor? No.
Who's the current lieutenant governor of Wisconsin?
Mandela Barnes.
That's right, and he's using that job as a springboard to run for U.S. Senate. And his predecessor, Rebecca Clayfish, is running for governor.
What the lieutenant governor does. Does he step in if the governor is no longer able to serve?
Exactly. Good job. Awesome. That's what the Wisconsin Constitution says. One job. If the governor dies, resigns, or is removed from office, the lieutenant governor becomes the governor for the remainder of that term. He or she becomes acting governor if the governor is impeached or becomes incapable because of mental or physical sickness from serving.
It can be very reactive to voters' needs.
The first woman elected to lieutenant governor.
It's a very odd position.
Barbara Lawton served from 2003 to 2011 with Governor Doyle.
Did you ever feel powerless in that role? Like, oh, I don't have any really power here.
I had such power or authority to convene people, to move things forward, and to move them into position to be voted on, et cetera, or to have influence on public opinion, that it felt like a position with great impact.
All right, so we are going to wrap up this segment of our election digital coverage tonight. We're going to take a little break, come back when polls close, and we'll have some of the results as they start to roll in, some analysis, some information. We're going to sit down with Mordecai Lee, our political insight provider tonight. So thank you for joining us for this part of the night. We're going to take a little break and we'll come back when polls close.
See you in 15 minutes.